a rose from out the azure bay. This was the chanter of the land, and guardian angels sang this strain.
When Harriet was at home at Wheatland, she was the hostess and helped to entertain Buchanan's many guests. These visits became a large part of her education. Many observed and marveled at Hallie's eerie knack with whatever it was she was doing and with whomever she was speaking. Reading and discussing together the latest news over breakfast with Nunc saw progress, much progress, in his Pygmalion niece. Hallie makes a new friend. Queen Victoria and Harriet Lane, both young, smart, and tempestuous. In March 1854, Hallie boarded ship and set sail for Liverpool, England. And then overland to London to unite with Uncle Nunc, who President Franklin Pierce had appointed to be our ambassador to the court of St. James. Nunc had written her the year before when his ship arrived August 26, 1853, to share his ambivalence about the new post, but adding, a proud American who feels himself equal at home to the best does not like to be shut out by the impassable barrier from the best, or rather the highest society in this country. Then, to Harriet's welcoming ears and reading eyes, he said, "My official position will be to enable me to surmount this barrier. Hallie, it would mortify me very much to see you treated differently from the other ladies of your situation." When she stepped off the gangplank in Liverpool, she undoubtedly was met by the United States representative there, our consul, and also famous writer Nathaniel Hawthorne. Hawthorne wrote later, "Mr. Buchanan's niece, Miss Lane, has an English rather than American aspect, being of stronger outline than most of our girls, although handsomer than English women generally, and of better manners than any I have seen. Extremely self-possessed and well poised, without affectation or assumption, but quietly conscious of rank. As much so as if she was an earl's daughter. In truth, she probably felt pretty much as an earl's daughter would towards the merchants' wives and daughters who made up the feminine portion of the part. I talked with her a little and found her sensible, vivacious, and firm-textured, rather than soft and sentimental. Her gown was terribly low, across the shoulders. I should judge her to be 25 or thereabouts. Harriet wrote on May 4th her confidant, Lily McAllister. "You have heard, dear Lily, of our long and boisterous voyage. Everything is as comfortable and agreeable as possible. About my home, all things promise to me a pleasant visit. After only 5 days in the old country, Harriet had some sharp opinions on the substandard caliber of lordly, honored public speakers. Last evening we went to a literary club dinner, the ladies of course in the gallery. I was disappointed in the speaking. We had expected several distinguished speakers, but only heard Lord Mayan and Lord Stanley, both men of talent. Lord Mayan was the best speaker at the table, but he talked too much and said too little. Lord Stanley talked a great deal and said nothing. I was gratified to see the manner of conducting a public dinner here, but without doubt, our people are more prompt and eloquent. In fact, I have seen no improvements upon our country. Friday the 5th. I was charmed at the opera last night. Beethoven's Fidelio was the piece. I heard the great Crivelli and think her superb. The music is grand and effective. Mr. Peabody's box is opposite the Queen's. She, Prince Albert, and 2 of the children were there. Mr. P is very kind. He had a large party of Americans last evening and seems ready to entertain any who come. I only arrived here on Saturday evening, and until presented to the Queen, will not be fairly in the London world. My court dress is now absorbing most of my attention, as I will be presented this day next week, the 11th. This is rather intense, as I must act entirely for myself. I go to decide upon it today. Tomorrow and Saturday, I go to dinner parties, and I suppose will be fairly launched in the gay world after next week. I had a glimpse of the Queen yesterday. She held a levee, gentlemen alone, at St. James. Lady Owsley took me to the park, where we had an excellent view of all the royal procession. The lifeguards are splendid-looking men mounted on black horses. The Queen's band played, of course. I was very much entertained, but I could scarcely convince myself that it was the ruler of this great kingdom approaching. The glitter was so great it appeared like a grand show. Because her uncle caused a stir the year before when he presented himself before the Houses of Parliament, wearing merely his black suit, Harriet prepared for her debut. When May 11th came, Harriet stepped before the Queen and Prince Albert, likely wearing her domed and bell-shaped hoop skirt, supported by crinoline petticoats with deep flounces or tiers, and long bloomers and pantaloons trimmed with lace. With judging eyes all around, she descended gracefully in a slow, perfect bow before Victoria, then ascending back up. Victoria would not long after declare Harriet consort to the ambassador, giving her all the privileges and entree of an ambassador's wife. Late in that March, the United Kingdom entered the Crimean War against Russia with disastrous results. In the year Harriet would be in London, she would write how this war was always a sad weight upon many hearts. The 2 great armies composed of 4 nations saw from the slopes of the vast amphitheater 700 British cavalry proceed at a rapid pace and in perfect order to certain destruction. Such a spectacle was never seen before, and we trust will never be repeated. The error was one of unusual simplicity, and requires no science to understand it. Costless and fruitless, it stands by itself as a grand heroic deed. Later in 1854, Lord Alfred Tennyson would read his daily newspaper about the losses of the Light Cavalry Brigade, and from his pen unfurled the charge of the Light Brigade and the grimly patriotic lines, "The British soldier will do his duty, even to certain death. and is not paralyzed by the feeling that he is the victim of some hideous blunder. That April, Hard Times had begun serialization in Charles Dickens' magazine, Household Words. Now, in a thrillingly international city for the first time in her life, the home of her favorite author, Harriet saw the begrimed, hungry children sleeping in alleys alongside the royal grandeur, and her Silesian heart was broken for them. Later in that year of 1854, cholera swept through a sprawling, dense, poor neighborhood in the Broad or Broadwick section of London. Thousands lay about, dehydrated from extreme watery diarrhea, some knotted up by cramps, others stilled by shock. And for 500, in just 9 horrific days starting August 31st, death came in the end. And all these 500 victims, Dr. John Snow discovered, had come from drinking the coursing fluid, carrying the bacteria Vibrio cholerae from a single pump. With monarchs being thrown out all across Europe in a wave of reform, England was scrambling to do better for her people. It was a time of doing the right thing. Three years before Harriet's arrival in London, Prince Albert did do the very right thing. It was his master stroke of creating the immortal public palace with 14,000 exhibitors sharing their fancies, treasures, and inventions from the far corners of the world. On opening day, Queen Victoria wrote in her journal, "The nave was full of people, which had not been intended, and deafening cheers and waving of handkerchiefs continued the whole time of our long walk from one end of the building to the other. Every face was bright and smiling, and many had tears in their eyes. In just 24 weeks, 6 million ticket-holding visitors came, from the rich and fancy to the tidy and poor, all equally enthralled as the hint of tomorrow stood about them on display, imaginings set afire and hopes quickened by the sight of strange, new things and fabulous beauty once thought impossible. The space encompassing this blend of thrilled humanity was almost 1 million square feet, with a vaulted see-through ceiling that was 120 feet high. All felt freed under this cavernous space with its vast steel-reinforced glass dome that let the sun anoint the scene with heavenly benevolence. Albert's Crystal Palace Exposition in 1851 was the first World's Fair. Victoria would write in her journal of that perfect day of May 1st, 1851, "This day is one of the greatest and most glorious days of our lives, with which to my pride and joy the name of my dearly beloved Albert is forever associated. It is a day which makes my heart swell with thankfulness." Punch, usually a magazine that mocked, called this event the grandest and most cheerful, the brightest and most splendid show that eyes had even looked on since the creation of the world. Wrote another, "The exhibition has been shown to be a great peace movement, a great moral movement, and a great industrial movement." The relocated Crystal Palace opened again just 6 weeks after Harriet's arrival on June 10, 1854. Complete with new, life-size, roaming, model dinosaurs, quote, in the wild. It was all to Harriet the most perfect and beautiful scene she'd ever seen, a far, far cry from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Harriet certainly knew the whole story of how the Americans at the first exposition got off to such a disastrously sorry start without a dime of government support. But banker George Peabody saved the day, and the invention revolution in the New World crashed like waves on the shores of the old country. In a week or two, to everyone's astonishment, the American exhibit was filled out with startling offerings. Samuel Colt's six-shooter, Matthew Brady's daguerreotypes of famous Americans, Cyrus McCormick's Reaper, Charles Goodyear's new hardened rubber products, and wrote Jake Rawson, an American locksmith named Alfred C. Hobbs crossed the Atlantic, stepped into the throngs of industrial suppliers and media at the Great Exhibition in London, and announced that the cherished British-made Chubb lock was merely a plaything in front of astonished onlookers. Hobbs picked the lock in 25 minutes. Asked to do it a second time, he succeeded, this time in just 7 minutes. In moments, the American had become the Houdini of the lock industry. But the quiet sensation was the modest but revolutionary exhibit of the Robbins and Lawrence Company from Windsor, Vermont, showing a set of breech-loading rifles, the first truly mass-produced objects that were also truly interchangeable with their 60-some-odd parts. It won the grand medal. Their exhibit, the arrival of the American factory system that has since become the world's way of making things, galvanized into action the titans of British industry, hastened to the States to capture all the knowledge and equipment they could on this breakthrough, spending over $100,000 period dollars in the process, even to the point of hiring Harper's Ferry assembly genius James Henry Burton to set up the Royal Enfield Arms Factory. The British Army placed an order for 25,000 rifles for the Crimean War and also ordered 141 of the Robbins and Lawrence metalworking machines. The future had arrived. The Americans were, to the old empires, bumpkins no more. The most popular American consort in England. Spring 1855. In March 1855, Harriet and her uncle dined with the royal family. "We have dined with the Queen. The Queen was most gracious and talked a great deal to me. Uncle sat on her right, and Prince Albert was talkative, and altogether we passed a charming evening." Everything, of course, was magnificent at the table, with 4 candles each, with mirrors and candles all around the room, a band of delicious music playing all the time. It was like a fairyland. She also wrote, "Everything is unsettled here about the war, and really seems in a bad way at present." May 2nd, 1855. Yesterday I attended the second drawing room of the season. It was a very full and brilliant one. I wore a pink silk petticoat, overskirts of pink tulle, puffed and rimmed with blonde and apple blossoms, and so was the body. Her Majesty was very gracious to me yesterday, as was also the Prince. On Wednesday there is to be a ball at Buckingham Palace, which we shall of course attend. After one such occasion, Nunc said to Harriet with a hint of jealousy, "Well, a person could have supposed you were a great beauty, the way you were talked about today."
But in spite of all temptations to belong to other nations, he remains an Englishman. He remains an Englishman. For in spite of all temptations.
The ambassador was upstaged again in June of 1855 when he received with others an honorary degree in civil laws from Oxford University. Wrote an eyewitness for the Massachusetts Teacher publication, "The theater will accommodate over 4,000 persons, and on this occasion, Wednesday, June 20, it presented a very brilliant appearance. The doors were opened at 10 o'clock, and immediately the student gallery was crowded with its full complement. The students consider this their Saturnalia, and have a sort of prescriptive claim to be disorderly. They commence at once a series of cheers or of groans as some of their number announce a popular or an unpopular name. The American ambassador's consort, Miss Harriet Lane." Harriet's name was called out, and she received loud cheers from the student body. But the first name announced was that of Mr. Buchanan, our minister.
No blessed! No blessed!
Yoink-a-doodle, keep it up. Yoink-a-doodle, down. On feather, then your captain, hold it, then you band it. Order! Order this minute! A few of the students cried out, "No! Non placet!" One sung out Yankee Doodle, with the Chancellor crying out, "Order!" Time it was to return home. Early in October 1855, Harriet's ship departed. Nunc sent Harriet one last letter. "Good luck to you on your native soil. I miss you greatly, but know it was for your good that you should go home at this delightful weather instead of encountering a winter passage. Every person I meet has something kind to say of you. You have left a good name behind, and that is something, but not more than you deserve.